Have you ever been in a room full of people and somehow noticed everything no one else did? The slight pause before someone answered a question, the way someone smiled, but only with their mouth, the tension that quietly sat between two people, even though no one said a word. And while everyone else seemed relaxed, laughing, moving on, you were there, picking up on something deeper, something unspoken. And maybe you've wondered, why do I notice these things? Why does my mind keep observing when others just live? Psychology says this kind of awareness isn't random. It often comes from the way your brain has learned to process the world more carefully, more deeply, and sometimes more quietly. And that doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It might just mean your brain works differently. And that's not weakness. It's something else entirely. Because when you're a quiet observer, your mind doesn't rush to fill silence. It sits in it. It listens. And in that space, you begin to notice patterns that others miss. Not because you're trying to analyze everything, but because your attention naturally goes beneath the surface. Think about conversations. Most people are focused on what to say next. They're waiting for their turn, thinking about how they sound, how they're being perceived. Their attention is split. But you're watching. You're noticing tone, pauses, inconsistencies. You're hearing what's said and what's avoided. This connects to something called emotional attunement. It's your ability to sense emotional signals, even subtle ones. And people who are more reserved often develop this more strongly because they spend less energy expressing and more energy observing. It's like your brain becomes a quiet receiver. And over time, you start picking up things that aren't obvious. Like when someone says, "I'm fine," but something feels off. Or when a group dynamic shifts slightly, even if no one acknowledges it. You feel it. And sometimes that can be overwhelming, because noticing more also means feeling more. You don't just see behavior, you process meaning. And that's where overthinking can start to creep in. You replay conversations, you analyze small details, you wonder what something really meant. This doesn't mean you're overcomplicating life. It might just mean your brain is trying to make sense of complexity that others don't even register. There's also something deeper going on here. A lot of people who are highly observant grew up in environments where paying attention mattered. Maybe emotions weren't always expressed clearly. Maybe you had to read between the lines to understand how someone really felt. Maybe silence meant something, and you learned to decode it. This is connected to attachment patterns, how we learn to relate to people early in life. If you grew up needing to be aware of moods, reactions, or subtle changes in behavior, your brain adapted. It became alert, sensitive, observant, not by choice, but by necessity. And even now, that awareness stays with you. But here's the thing most people don't talk about. What helped you understand people can also make it harder to feel at ease around them. Because when you notice everything, it's hard to switch off. You walk into a room and instantly pick up the emotional atmosphere. You sense when something feels off, even if no one else does. You catch the small things, the hesitation, the shift in tone, the forced smile. And your brain quietly starts connecting dots. This is where something called cognitive bias can come into play. Your mind tries to interpret patterns based on past experiences. So if you've learned that certain behaviors lead to certain outcomes, your brain starts predicting. Sometimes accurately, sometimes a little too cautiously. So you might assume tension where there is none, or read deeper meaning into something that was simple. And that can be exhausting, because you're not just living the moment, you're analyzing it in real time. But there's also a quiet strength in this. You understand people in ways they don't always understand themselves. You can sense emotions before they're expressed. You can see patterns in behavior over time. You can pick up on authenticity and the lack of it. And in a world where so much is surface level, that kind of awareness is rare. Still, it can make you feel different. Like you don't quite fit into fast, loud, easy conversations. Like you're always slightly outside the moment watching it, instead of fully being in it. And that feeling can be lonely. But it doesn't mean you're disconnected. It means you connect differently. You don't look for constant interaction. You look for depth, meaning, realness. And when you find it, you're fully there. Another reason quiet people notice more is because they're less driven by social comparison in the moment. Many people are focused on how they're being seen. They're adjusting, performing, reacting. But when you're not caught up in that, your attention goes outward. You observe instead of perform. And that gives you a different kind of clarity. You see how people shift depending on who they're around. You notice inconsistencies in behavior. You understand that what people show isn't always who they are. And that awareness changes how you trust. You become more selective, not because you're judgmental, but because you're aware. You don't ignore red flags easily. You don't overlook subtle emotional signals. You don't blindly accept surface-level interactions. You take your time. And that's not a flaw. It's discernment. But there's also something else happening beneath all this. Emotional regulation. Quiet people often process emotions internally, rather than expressing them immediately. So while others might react quickly, you pause. You think, you feel, you reflect. And during that pause, you notice more. Because you're not rushing past the moment, you're sitting with it. But sometimes, this can turn into emotional holding. You absorb things without releasing them. You carry conversations in your mind long after they've ended. You replay moments, trying to understand them fully. You feel things deeply, but don't always express them outwardly. And that weight can build over time. So even though your awareness is a strength, it needs balance. Because noticing everything doesn't mean you have to carry everything. You're allowed to let things pass without analyzing them. You're allowed to experience without dissecting. You're allowed to not have all the answers. And that doesn't make you less aware. It just makes you more at peace. There's a quiet shift that happens when you start trusting your observations without letting them control you. You begin to notice things and let them go. You understand people without needing to decode every detail. You stay aware without becoming overwhelmed. And that's where your strength becomes something steady, not heavy. Because the truth is, the world needs people who notice. People who see beyond words, people who understand emotional nuance, people who can sense what isn't being said. But those people also need space to rest their minds, to not always be on, to not always be observing, to just exist without analyzing. And if you're someone who's always noticed more than others, this doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It might just mean your awareness developed in a way that made you more perceptive, more thoughtful, more attuned. And that's not weakness. That's depth. So the next time you catch yourself noticing something small, something subtle, pause. Not to analyze it further, but just to acknowledge it. You see things, and that matters. Just don't forget, you deserve to feel the moment too, not just observe it. If you enjoy understanding human behavior like this, subscribe. And I'm curious, what's something you've noticed about people that most others seem to miss?